Morning, friends. Morning. So I go to the gym quite a lot, 4-5 times a week, I guess, once a fortnight, anyway. And I've noticed lately that the size of gym goers' water bottles has been getting bigger and bigger. Has anyone seen this trend? The latest fad is something called the Mammoth water jug, which, as the name suggests, is a water jug that is mammoth. And apparently the idea is if you drink 2.5-3 litres of water during your workout, you have a better workout. Maybe that's true, maybe it's not true, but I don't do it because I'm concerned about drowning. Which is my segue into teaching you this morning about the relationship between water and religion. The relationship between being thirsty and being a person of faith. The three great monotheistic religions of the world, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, all began, as you know, in the deserts of the Near East and the Middle East. The sacred writings, therefore, of these desert religions are essentially the scratchings of very thirsty men. If you live in a harsh desert environment, water to you is never a fashion accessory. Water to you is never something that optimizes your workout. Water to you is life. Water to you is the difference between making it and not making it. The difference between being alive and being dead. And so for that reason, in the three big monotheistic religions of Judaism, Christianity, and later Islam, water and thirst are not just water and satiating your thirst. They are symbols of life, faith, of all that's good and true and holy in this world. The greatest example of this in the religious world is the Jewish festival of Sukkot. The festival of Sukkot takes place in Jerusalem at the very end of the dry season. So it takes place at that time of the year when farmers get worried. They get worried because it's been dry for a long time and they really need the water to come. Because if the water doesn't come, the crops won't grow, and if the crops won't grow, we'll all starve to death. And so every year, at the very end of the dry season, from all over Israel, tens of thousands of men, women and children would travel to the holy city to take part in the week-long festival of Sukkot. Now, this is where it gets interesting. On the very last day of this festival, when the pilgrims and worshippers are at their most euphoric, a procession of priests would march from the center of the temple in Jerusalem out of the city to a nearby spring of water. One of the priests would fill a big jar with water from that stream and then return with it to the center of the temple. As he entered the temple courts, the tens and tens of thousands of men, women and children who are there celebrating the end of the dry season, who are there asking God to send water. They would see the priest carrying the water jug above his head. And together they recite in unison the Jewish prayer for rain. Baruch atah Adonai hamelech ha'olam bo'ari peri ha'adamah. Blessed art thou, O Lord our God, King of the heavens, who brings forth the fruit of the earth. It's a rain dance. Tens of thousands of them reciting this prayer for rain over and over again. When they'd done it enough, the priest would climb the steps of the altar and he would pour the water from his jug onto the fire of the altar. Steam would then rise from the altar up to the heavens. The crowd would fall deathly silent. And the priest would offer one final prayer for rain. In the Gospel according to St. John. We're told that at the very last day of the festival of Sukkot, on the day when the priest carries the water from the spring outside of the city into the centre of the temple, on the day when everyone prays the prayer for rain, at the very moment when the crowd falls silent and they're expecting to hear this priest give one final prayer for rain, at that very moment, John suggests that Jesus interrupts this most religious festival. When the crowd fell silent to pray and hear the prayer for rain, Jesus, John says, shouts at the top of his voice, "If anyone is thirsty, come to me. Whoever believes in me, a spring of living water will well up within him." For this morning's lesson, I want to go back a month or two before that and look at a story in which Jesus meets a woman, and they talk about water and life and faith. In John chapter 1, the writer tells us that the Pharisees heard that Jesus was gaining and baptizing more disciples than John, although in fact it was not Jesus who baptized, but his disciples. When the Lord learned of this, he left Judea and went back once more to Galilee. So a little bit of background here. The Pharisees, who are mainly based in Jerusalem, are growing a little bit uneasy about Jesus' initial success in the Jerusalem area. This is the early days of Jesus' ministry. He's pulling in big crowds. He's the latest, preacher in town. Everyone loves him. Tens of thousands of people are attracted to him. This makes the Pharisees uneasy. Jesus knows that with their jealousy also comes contempt. And with their jealous contempt also comes danger. So, fueled by this, Jesus says, you know what? Too much heat right now. Let's go north to Galilee, where we come from, where we'll be a little bit safer. Then we're told that in order to get from Judea in the south, where the jealous Pharisees are causing a problem, to Galilee in the north, where his home is, John is careful to tell us that Jesus had to go through, notice how it's phrased, he had to go through Samaria. Now when the text says that Jesus had to go through Samaria, what it actually means is that Jesus, as a Bible-reading, God-fearing, prayer-saying, decent human being, under normal circumstances would not go to Samaria. Because Samaria was dirty, it was thought to be immoral, it was a bit like the shady side of Vegas, if I can put it like that. But none of that matters, because in this sentence Jesus is on the run. And when you're on the run, if you have to take a shortcut up a back seedy alley to do what you got to do, that's fine. So he goes into Samaria. And after travelling some time, John tells us that he meets a woman at a well. He strikes up a conversation with this woman, and he says, "Will you give me a drink?" The woman responds racially, and she responds sexually. She says, "You are a Jew, I am a Samaritan." "You are a Jew, I am a Samaritan." "Woman, how can you ask me for a drink?" Good question. Let's deal with the racial issue first. The Samaritans, as you perhaps know, were descendants of the 10 northern tribes of Israel, who about 8 centuries previously had sold their Jewish soul so they could survive in the real world. They abandoned their belief in one God and started believing in lots of other gods so they could survive in a world that was like that. They did what they had to do to just adapt to their culture. And in so doing, they gave up part of who they were. So they sort of believed in the God of the Bible. They sort of believed in the Torah. They sort of worshipped the same God that Jesus worshipped. They were sort of all right, but only sort of. To a Jew like Jesus, Bible-reading, God-fearing, prayer-saying, they were anathema. They were scum. They were Jews in name only. They were the worst of the worst. In the eyes of the Jews, they were not Jews at all, but excuse me, but a parody of what a good person was supposed to be. So there's this tension, this animosity between a Jew like Jesus and someone who lives in Samaria. And this woman knows this. So naturally she's puzzled that Jesus, as a Jew, should be talking to her. And she's also puzzled, notice carefully please, and I suppose you're so grateful that I'm here to point these things out to you. She's also puzzled that Jesus is talking to her. Why? Because she's a woman. The reason for this is because this story takes place at a well. And in the ancient world, water wells were pick-up joints. The reason for that is quite straightforward. Getting water was women's work. So if you wanted to meet a woman, you went to the well, because that's where women were, doing women's work. For that reason, if a woman did not want to be bothered by the advances of a man, she would go to the well with her friends in a group. That was a signal that they were not available, they were not interested, they were busy. They were there to get water, put the water into their buckets, and go home and do their chores. That was the only thing on the agenda. However, notice please that this particular woman is there on her own. This subtle detail tells us something about the sort of woman that she is. She's okay with being picked up. And so when she says to Jesus, "Why are you talking to me as a woman?" she is being flirtatious. A man does not talk to a woman at a well unless he's trying to pick her up. And a woman does not go to a well on her own and talk to a man unless she is willing to be picked up. So, right, Jesus is in this very grey area here. He's in a place he's not supposed to be, doing something he's not supposed to do. At this point, what does the woman assume? She assumes that Jesus is like every other man she's ever met. And is she okay with that? 100%. That's why she's there. In the next sentence, Jesus responds to her question and says, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him and he would have given you living water." So it's so horrible, I suppose, when someone ruins flirtation with religion. That's exactly what Jesus is doing here. So the phrase "gift of God" is code word in this sentence for salvation. What Jesus is essentially saying to this woman is, "Sweetheart, you don't have to be like this. This thing, like coming here on your own, talking to guys, picking up people you met 5 minutes ago. You don't have to be like that. You can start over. You can be different. You can live a whole other way, and it can be better for you. You can have living water." And in the desert religions, what is living water a symbol of? Life, faith, everything that's good and true and decent in this world. The woman, however, didn't understand what Jesus was talking about. She thinks he's talking about water. Now, men, you may have understood that when you talk to a woman, sometimes they just don't understand. And ladies, you may have noticed that when you talk to a man, sometimes they don't understand. And quite often, you'll have noticed, this complete lack of misunderstanding happens simultaneously. So you can be talking here, and they're talking here, and you're having a conversation, technically, but you're both talking about completely different things, And neither of you are understanding the other one. Do you understand? Okay, yeah, lots of nods. Okay, good. So she says to Jesus, "Sir, you've got nothing to take the water out of the well with," and the well's pretty deep. Actually, it was over 100 feet deep. And in verse 13, Jesus says, No, I'm not talking about the actual water in the well. I'm talking about water. I'm talking about something deep, something good, something true. He says, everyone who drinks the water you're talking about will get thirsty again, but whoever drinks the water I give him will never thirst. Indeed, that water will spring up within him to eternal life. Then the woman's lack of understanding becomes crass and just dumb. She says, "Sir, give me this water so that I won't get thirsty and keep having to come here every day and do my chores." I don't know what she's thinking right now. Magic water, I don't know. But she's clueless. Pretty good at flirting with guys, apparently, but clueless. Then it gets interesting. Jesus says, okay, this is getting nowhere. I'll tell you what, why don't you go and bring your husband and we'll talk about this together. She says, I don't have a husband. So what are we doing now? You're out of town at a conference and you're talking to someone and they happen to mention in the conversation that they don't have a husband or a wife. What is the nature of that conversation? It's flirting. She's doing this again. I don't have a husband. She thinks Jesus is just like all the other guys. When she says, I don't have a husband, she is saying quite clearly, I am down for whatever right now. I am available for whatever right now. It's good. That's why I came to the well on my own, after all. To which Jesus says, you're right to say you don't have a husband. The fact is, you have had 5 husbands, and the man you're currently with is not your husband. Okay. So let's, no judgment here whatsoever. No, I'm quite serious. There is no judgment here whatsoever. This is just mathematics. But let's just be clear what we're talking about with this woman. Pardon me. We're talking about a woman, given the life expectancy in the ancient world, I'm going to say she's somewhere in her 30s or 40s. That's generous, maybe a little younger. And she has had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 marriages, all of which have ended prematurely, either through divorce or through death. Now it seems to me that when you have gone through 5 major relationships in your life, each of which have ended prematurely, either through divorce or death, you have earned every single line upon your face. Is that a fair statement, ladies and gentlemen? Like, you've earned it. This woman has been through more than her fair share of hard times. So much so that her current relationship, although it is certainly a major relationship, she's not putting the ring on the finger thing. She can't do the white dress thing again. She just can't do it. She's been through too much heartache. She's been, stood over too many graves. She's been through too many divorce settlements. So I'll live with you and all that, but I can't do the marriage thing again. That's where she's at. She's been through too much. Disillusioned, and who can blame her? So she's currently on relationship number 6, but apparently she's flexible because she's at the well on her own. The next sentence. So Jesus says you don't have a husband and the man you're with is not your husband. She responds, now she wants to be religious. She says, Sir, I see that you're a prophet. Our fathers worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews claim that the place where we must worship is Jerusalem. You know what's going on there, right? She's flirting with Jesus. Jesus says, you've been with 5 men, and you're currently with someone who's not your husband. And now she's like, whoa, change the conversation, change the conversation, change the conversation. Talk about some religious. She just wants to take attention off herself now. She raises this issue, and it's an important issue. And it has to do with where God is. Now here's the question for her. Where is God? Some people cleverer than me say he's in Jerusalem. Other people also cleverer than me say he's to be worshipped on this other mountain in Samaria, Mount Gerizim. And I don't know about all these clever people. But I got to tell you, for me, I don't know where God is. I don't know where he was in marriage number 1 or marriage number 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or this current dude I'm shacked up with or these other people I meet at this well every other day just to take my mind off this miserable, ridiculous life I'm forced to live. I don't know where God is. Except to know that he's not here. He's somewhere else with other people in their perfect lives. But me, with my stuff, for some people, God is now here, but for me, he's nowhere. I don't know. Jesus declared, believe me, woman, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. A time is coming and has now come when the true worshippers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. For they are the kind of worshippers the Father seeks. God is spirit, and his worshippers must worship in spirit and truth. It's getting good now. And just as it's getting good, just as we're starting to get somewhere, the disciples enter from stage left. Cue the dumb music. So in John's Gospel, when you read the word disciple, that is code word for dumb. Prior to the death and resurrection of Jesus, the disciples just don't get it. They understand nothing, they see nothing, they hear nothing, they are ridiculously stupid. And they lived with Jesus for 3 years. I find that comforting, and so should you. Anyway, the text tells us that they were surprised to find Jesus talking with a woman. Of course they were. They're men, some of them are fishermen. They know what's up. They know what happens at wells with women, and what's Jesus doing? Good men don't hang out in places like this, talking to people like this, but Jesus does. He'll talk to anyone, anywhere, anytime. Then, leaving her water jar. In the ancient world, what is a water jar symbolic of? What happens at the festival of Sukkoth? What does the priest take? From the center of the temple to the spring outside of the city, he takes a water jar. Water jars, they're everywhere in first century Israel. In fact, there's so many of them in first century Israel. When you go to Israel today, they're still there. They're literally like litter. And they are symbols of life, of faith, and of religion. What is John telling us subtly? She left it. Like that, whatever I was trying to do before, whatever I was looking for in my first 5 marriages, whatever I'm looking for at this well every single day, whatever reason drags me to this place, I'm done. Done. Not doing it anymore. So I'm going to leave it right where it is. And she goes back to the town and says to the people, come see a man who told me everything I ever did. Ooh, but that was awkward. Could this be the Christ? And they came out of the town and made their way toward him. Meanwhile, his disciples urged him, dumb as they were, Jesus, eat something. But he said to them, I have food to eat that you know nothing about. Then the disciples said to each other, could someone have brought him food? Like was Jesus holding out on us? Why do we go to the town to get food when Jesus already had food? Did he like put something in his pocket from the breakfast buffet? What's going on? And that was the level of their interest and their intellect at this point. Verse 34, Jesus, I imagine, pulling his hair out, says, "My food is to do the will of him who sent me and to finish his work. Do you not say, 4 months more and then the harvest? But I tell you, open your eyes and look at the fields. They are ripe for harvest. Even now the reaper draws his wages. Even now he harvests the crop for eternal life, so that the sower and reaper are glad together. Thus the saying, one sows, another reaps, is true. I sent you to reap what you have not worked for. Others have done the hard work, but you reaped the benefits for their labor." Now, all of that in the ancient world was always spoken negatively. It was a way of saying, I came up with the ideas, but they got the credit. It was a way of saying, I got the sale, but they got the commission. It was a way of saying, I was the person who took this project forward, but my stupid boss, got the pat on the back from the director. I did everything, they got all the credit. That's what that whole saying, one sows, another reaps, was always used for. Jesus, however, uses it positively. He says to his followers, will you please just open your eyes? You look at a woman at a well, and what do you see? Tell me, what do you see? You see a woman. You see a Samaritan. And if I filled you in on the details, you would see a divorced Samaritan woman who's currently living with a man to whom she is not married. And because of your prejudice, and because of your narrow mind, and because of your inability to understand what God's really at, that is all you would see. But I'm telling you, this divorced woman who's been through more than her fair share of pain and disappointment and misery, she is so open right now. And so ready to leave the junk that doesn't work for her and embrace a new and a better way. And she is ready to experience God and to live for God, not in places of theological orthodoxy, because they'll never have her. Just like some churches would never have you. But here, everywhere, now, she understands God, and life, and faith. Many of the Samaritans from that town believed in him because of the woman's story. So when the Samaritans came to him, they urged him to stay with them. And he stayed 2 days. Funny, isn't it? The Pharisees, at the start of the story, were good lads. They say their prayers, they read their Bible, they're God-fearing folks. Not only did they not want Jesus, they wanted to get Jesus. And now at the end of the story, the bad people, Samaritans, the nasties, they don't want Jesus to leave. They want to put him up for a few nights. And he stays. Now John is saying something controversial here. He's saying the good people, this is so gospel, the good people, they won't get it. They just won't. The bad people, with the stories, with the episodes, they'll get it. Because they uniquely understand the need for a fresh start and a new life and a better way and an offer of salvation that is free. The bigger picture, I think, in this story, and the idea that John wants us to get, is that in the complications of life, in the frustrations of life, in the living of life, God is. He just is. In church? Yeah, sure. But not only. When you leave church and deal with that horrible thing you've got to deal with this afternoon, God is. When you get up tomorrow morning and face that situation you've got to face, God is. As you handle that complicated family situation, God is. As tomorrow night you struggle with that temptation and that addiction that beats you 9 times out of 10, God is. As you sit lonely and depressed with no friends, God is. Not just in the church and the so-called holy places of this world, but here, everywhere, all the time, all the place, with all of who He is. When in theology we talk about God being here, what we talk about is God being here with all of His love, all of His mercy, all of His kindness, all of His forgiveness, all of the time. When you sleep, when you work, when you laugh, when you pray, when you play and when you cry, God is all the time. And I don't know about you, but I find that comforting. And I hope you do too. God bless you today. See you next week.